Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 1943 film Frankenstein Meets the Wolf Man. This is episode 386. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castlebridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find now at Global Comics. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Because life is short, but death is long.
Why do you say that to me? Why do you say that to me? And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
See, I would respond by singing that song that the kind of the nonsense song that Jason that you and I were stuck on, but I can't remember how it goes now. How does it go? The la-di da, whatever. It's like he sings.
You're talking about Farola Faroli?
Yeah, that one.
It's the same song, yes.
Yeah, but that part, I just don't remember how it goes now. If I just watch those.
Farola Faroli. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I was stuck on that for like 2 days, but no.
Oh, it's fabulous. It's really good. To me, it's the most memorable thing about Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. All right. Speaking of, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is a 1943 American horror film directed by Roy William Neill, starring Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman and Bela Lugosi as Frankenstein's monster. This was the first of a series later called Monster Rallies, combining characters from several film series in the Universal world. This film's script, written by Kurt Siodmak, follows the ghost of Frankenstein and the Wolfman. The film involves Larry Talbot, who is brought back to life, seeking a way to return to his death to escape his werewolf curse. He meets up with gypsy Maleva, Maria Uskinskaya, who advises him the only way to stay dead is to confer with Dr. Frankenstein. The doctor is long dead, but his equipment is in working condition, leading Talbot to seek the help of scientist Dr. Mannering, Patrick Knowles, and Frankenstein descendant Baroness Elsa Frankenstein, Ilona Massey, the lovely Ilona Massey. Talbot then attempts to have his life sucked from his body and transferred into Frankenstein's monster. Okay, there's a lot of plot in that, considering that this movie moves like lightning. So I'm looking forward to getting our opening thoughts. Julia, we haven't started with you in a while, and then we'll go to Drew, who I know is bonkers about this film, and then Tony, and then I'll go. Julia.
I don't actually think it's true that we haven't started with me in a while. I feel like it was very recently that we started with me, but that's okay.
We can start with. I can go back and edit my comments if you.
It's fine. I don't mind.
Okay, kick us off. Yeah, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
So I don't remember if I had seen this before at some point. Maybe, but it's interesting. It's an interesting film. I really liked Lon Chaney Jr.'s performance in this. I thought it was really interesting. I love how he just comes off as being so earnest and kind and sweet and concerned, and then when he's the Wolfman, gosh, I have to say, I think my favorite thing about this was the effects, because the stunts, his like the parkour jumping around that the Wolfman does on the wall, and all these different stunts that they do. And if I will go through them as we go through the film, but there was just a lot of things where I was like, that is so cool looking. I just loved a lot of the sets. I loved a lot of that stuff. The business with the monster is very brief, and I don't know. I didn't love it. I thought it was kind of weird. But I think there's some definitely some interesting things. I'm not sure this is a film that I'll actually remember very much. Like, I don't remember if I've seen it before. I don't know if I'll remember seeing it, a year from now. But it is interesting.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Drew, I have the feeling this is a deeply important film to you. So, what are your thoughts?
It is. This is a movie I watch at least a year, usually during this time of year. Very much linked Halloween with me because the first time I ever saw it when I was a kid, it was around Halloween, and I just couldn't believe that there was a movie with both Frankenstein and the Wolfman in it. That was just so cool to me. My appreciation of it is actually grown as I've gotten older. I'm not going to say that I'm blind to its faults. I do think it is a much better Wolfman movie than a Frankenstein movie. Although I think the idea of using Frankenstein's technology for essentially assisted suicide is a very clever conceit.
Mm.
I like all the acting. I think this is very atmospheric. Unfortunately, I think Bela Lugosi got kind of a raw deal in this movie, and we can talk more about that later. But I love this movie. I think it is hands down the best of the Monster Rally movies. It's got a really good script. Like it's very tight. As you said, it moves along really quickly, but it doesn't have the anthology feel that the other Monster Rally movies have, like where at least everything kind of ends up together. I could, if nothing, stand to perhaps be a little bit longer, but that's not how they made them back in the day. And I'm excited. I wanted to talk about this movie for years, so I'm glad that we're capping off Halloween season with it. So I'm excited to get into it.
I wanted to add that I really liked Elsa. Is it Elsa Frankenstein? Is that her name?
Elsa Frankenstein, yeah.
Yeah, I liked her a lot. I like that actress. I like that performance. That was really cool.
Wonderful.
She's
Tony,
great.
what about you?
Yeah, I like this movie. It's kind of interesting because I talked about this movie on Borgo Past podcast.
Oh yeah.
So this is my second kind of, but it's cool to come to it like with everyone here. So there is a lot to talk about with this movie. I find it fascinating that how they made a movie where the intent of the Wolfman after he comes back is to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Like that's really dark. Like dark in a way that a lot of Universal films perhaps aren't.
Yeah.
And I thought that that's a really interesting thing to go over and to explore.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines is Maleva saying, "He's not insane. He simply wants to die." It's like, oh my god, that made me want to cry.
I mean, there's some really great performances. I agree totally with Drew that it's definitely a Wolfman heavy movie. There's more to talk about when we get into it. It has just a lot of kind of really memorable moments. It does wrap up kind of quickly, unfortunately. But there's a lot of cool bits and a lot of interesting stuff going on. Some great character actors. But starting a movie where Wolfman gets resurrected and then as soon as he becomes conscious, realizes, oh no, I'm immortal and I don't want to be this. That's really cool and really heavy. So there's a lot to go over. I'm excited to talk about it with everyone here.
Good. We'll make our way through it. I want to mention when Larry Talbot wakes up, we learn a lot of things quickly. One is that apparently he can't die for various reasons. He's the Wolfman, and the Wolfman is forever. But also, his father died of grief after believing that he had murdered his son and not killed the Wolfman, which is awful. Like it's an awful thing that actually happened after the end of that movie. And there are a number of like small miseries that are just sort of thrown into the film as it goes along.
That opening sequence to me is one of the best scenes as far as pure horror goes in Universal horror, because like the first time I saw this when I was a child, and that grave robber sticks his hand into the grave, and then we see Larry's hand comes up, it's already got claws on it, and like he grabs the guy's arm, the other grave robber hightails it out of it,
takes off. I'm like, so much for no man left behind. It's more like the pirate
Yeah.
Yes.
Higher
It's
philosophy.
more like guidelines, but it's effective stuff, like even in contemporary eyes, it's creepy.
Yeah, no, and the funny thing is, now that we're standing looking at the world of horror movies, which is the one where Jason Returns, where they open with a beginning that's almost just like this, where they're in a big creepy graveyard and
That it would be Jason Lives, which is an
ah.
absolute banger.
Oh my God, such a great opening, right? But it's if nothing else, I think it is Jason Lives is doing an homage to this opening, because this graveyard looks fantastic. All these graves and these guys in their hats and their clothes. I mean, this is like at this point in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, I kind of get the feeling that we're looking at Universal able to sort of crystallize itself into what Universal horror, really is. We also get the poem about the creation of the Wolfman, and this is the way that I always knew it in stories when I was growing up, and I don't remember why, but it was, it even a man was pure at heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfsbane blooms, and this is the way I always knew it, and the moon is full and bright. But that's not actually the way it went, and that's the way it's said here in this movie. But in the
It's
original Wolfman, it was
it's
different.
autumn moon in the Wolfman.
Yes.
And I don't know why that was changed. But I maybe nothing else, it was just to hammer home the idea of the full moon more.
Probably.
But
It was also probably only half remembered. I'm sure that they didn't bother to look at it. They just had a pretty decent. I mean, I'm guessing. I'm completely projecting. But as we've said a million times before, in the era before streaming and even before, like, just pop in a DVD, you kind of relied on just memory for a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
it's also, by the way, that's also paraphrased in one of my favorite band, Rat Child America. They do a song called "London After Midnight,"
Yeah.
and they have a interlude part, and somebody kind of speaks that creepily, that
Yeah.
line. It's always, so that's all. I listened to that a million times before I was like, oh yeah, that's also this phraseology. This phrasing of it is in this movie. So, but I always thought that was cool.
It's this also I really let's just talk about the world for a second, and then we'll get back to what is the deal with Lawrence Talbot, which I think will be our main topic. But this world, Lawrence Talbot has come to this town of or this area, city, country, whatever it is, called Valeria, and it is a
Visaria.
Visaria. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, Visaria, because it means like basically water place in German.
Oh,
So
excellent.
it's the dam and the waterfall and everything.
Oh yeah,
It was
Wasser.
supposed
Yeah.
to be in Germany, but because it's World War II and the screenwriter was a German Jew, he was like, "No, I don't want to make it in Germany. Let's make it in this fictional country."
Sure, but everybody's where the wonderful thing is, it's kind of it's a wonderful Hollywood version of a Germanic town, that they're having this big festival of wine, and everybody's wearing their lederhosen and their cool hats, and there's barrels of wine. And Julia, do you want to explain to us there's a musical number at the center of this monster movie that I think if you went out, you go out on a date on a Friday night, you go see Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and there's a musical number in the middle of it. And can you tell us about this?
Well, yeah. So the guy. Well, I mean, Drew already gave us a sample in the intro, where the guy sing. Like you said, "Fado la fado li" is the chorus, but then he's talking about the quote is, "The wine tonight is nobly blessed, fado la fado li, by such a lady and her guest, fado la fado li. To them I toast, come drink with me, that may they ever happy be, and may they live eternally." And Lawrence Talbot freaks the hell out and goes, "Stop that! Stop it! Quit that
Yes.
singing!
Yeah,
Eternally! I don't want to live eternally. Why did you say that to me? Get away from me!" It's like flips out,
but
and they're like, "Oh shit."
but that's partial. I mean, skipping to that immediately, kind of. I mean, this is after he's already murdered people.
True. Well,
We're coming back to it. Like, there's a whole section. Like, the reason he's so affected by that is he's already murdered people. He's already been in an asylum. He's already discovered he's immortal. And then he's also gone to visit. Like by the time we get there,
Yeah.
like I don't want to skip all the business.
Oh,
because
no,
by the time he's there, he's gone to a gypsy camp, said,
let
"Hey,
me
can you
let
kill
me
me?"
restate my question. I think all I'm getting at with this one, and then let's indeed go back just to the trick of the story of Lawrence Talbot. What's cool to me about this film, setting aside the plot, the
Right.
film just gives us this really bizarre world of beautiful women in coats, this elegant lady, and all these people in their Germanic clothing, and all of these Romani in their camps, and it is something that is beyond the 1940s. It's a bizarre, otherworldly un-Europe that is just presented for the audience, where you walk into, just like we've talked about with Hammer, and as Drew was the first person I heard say this, that Hammer is in dialogue with Universal. It's really true.
Right.
Universal has its own darn universe, and it
Well, and
looks like
I have to
itself.
throw the clothing in there. The clothing is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, the dress that the Frankenstein wears in that scene, in the party scene, I think it's in that scene where she has, it's like this the dress, it's kind of got sewn into it a really long necklace that's like a pearl necklace or whatever, and it's got like a diamond brooch that kind of swoops it back. It's just everything about the clothing. There's another guy who has this crazy shirt on with all these like polka dot things. I mean, it's just, I don't know, something about the clothing just to me really stood out as being
Yeah.
special.
Well, that's the non-place, non-time of
Yeah.
Yes.
Universal horror, which there's
Yeah.
actually on TV tropes, they have a name for this, which they call Uberwald. But yeah. But to me, in my head, no matter where it is, they say these movies take place, I'm just like, this is Transylvania.
This is Transylvania.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah, it's the generic horror movie idea of Eastern Europe,
Yes.
where these movies just happen to take place.
Yes, that's a wonderful way of putting it, because yeah, I'm looking at a moment here where the professor and the doctor and Baroness Frankenstein are like at some ruins with Larry Talbot, and they're all dressed like the 40s. They're dressed like Hollywood. She's wearing these really swell sort of Katharine Hepburn pants and a blouse and a jacket and a brooch, and the guys are wearing these like Clark Kent double-breasted suits, and everybody else appears to be like around in like the 1870s. It is so bizarre and wonderful. It's a dream.
I love this universe. Like
Yes.
I even love artificiality of it, because like you were already talking about like the cemetery at the beginning. It doesn't look
Right.
like a real cemetery. It looks like a horror movie
Yes.
cemetery. And that
Yeah.
is an important distinction to make. Everything is so perfectly arch and gothic and weird, and
Yep.
I just want to live in it.
Well, the castle is so weird. Like the little, it's obviously a miniature, especially when at the end when it gets destroyed, it like comes apart in these big chunks of, like graham cracker. I mean, it's just so funny. So like that whole thing is like you're saying, it's very much, it's a movie. It's not, you're not expected to believe that this is a real place.
But
Well, they had already had, this is a decade in of Universal making horror films, so they had this sort of house style in place. But also, and this goes doubly for why the fact that there's a musical number in this movie. World War II was happening. So like people needed escapism. They wanted costumes, they wanted the place exotic, they wanted a musical number. Like nowadays, I don't think you would ever think about breaking up your werewolf movie with a song and dance about wine. But
if you did, it would be a choice. It would be like, boy, this new director on the scene really does make some crazy choices, like this song and dance number that he put in there. It would be, and that might be cool, or it might be a big failure, and people would debate it. But yeah, I think you're right. In the 40s, this is everybody's evening's main feature. so we're gonna kind of have the kitchen sink in it. I will say we have this ongoing conversation about broad humor. There's really not a lot here. There aren't there. This movie is so densely packed that there is not a lot of the closest we get to the funny working class guys are that we usually have in these universal horrors is in this case are the grave robbers at the beginning.
And Pop has some he's in over his head kind of humor, but he also disappears like
Yeah.
midway through the movie. So there was a scene that was cut that I kind of wish was still in it, but they cut all the monsters dialogue for reasons that I will get into later. But there was apparently when the Wolfman first revives Frankenstein and they're talking in that sort of ice pit. Larry Talbot explains to Frankenstein's monster that he is a werewolf, and he explains what that entails and everything. And apparently Frankenstein's monster was actually supposed to roll his eyes and be like, you be joking. And I kind of wish that scene was still in for the incredulousness of it, that Frankenstein's monster thinks the idea of someone being a werewolf is a bit preposterous.
I wonder that sounds apocryphal. I wonder if that's true. I guess we'll never know. I mean, that would be
It makes sense. It's weird because it makes sense and kind of because to Frankenstein's monster, he's a regenerated human.
yeah.
Well, and
Even
especially
though,
because it's
like,
the brain of Igor or whatever. That's
oh
what they
yeah,
said. Yeah, it's supposed to be at this point. That's why he's supposed to be blind, because they put Igor's brain into him, and for whatever reason that made him blind. And so yeah, he would be definitely, that would fit with that character if he's eye rolling. I would see
All
that.
right.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty good to kind of segue into this stuff. I know we're kind of
Well,
bouncing
I
around
wanted
the
to get
movies.
to I do want to talk about that, but I would like to first talk about Lon Chaney and Lawrence Talbot, and then let's go to what the hell is going on with the monster here, and then Julia, you can get back to his
Well,
blindness,
Drew wants to talk
or
about it
Drew,
too.
or the two of you.
Yeah.
But let's start first with Lon Chaney, who's really the star here, and so first, the phenomenon of Lon Chaney himself. Lon Chaney Jr., as we call him, Lon Chaney Jr., born in Oklahoma, 6'2", towers over essentially everybody that he encounters in this movie, and
So much better as this character than as Dracula.
he really seems to be his own here, right? I
Well,
mean,
this was his baby. Like
Yeah.
all the other monsters he played were roles that he inherited from
Yeah.
other people. Dracula, the Mummy. That those were not. This was like Lon Chaney. As much as he felt very trapped by the genre at times, he did care a lot about the Wolfman and the consistency between all these movies, even as like budgets started to get lower and scripts started to grade in quality. And there's actually talk about how Universal actually used to charge people 25 cents to be, or 12 cents, sorry, to be able to watch movies being seen. And that stuff, that sort of physical business that Julia was talking about earlier, apparently in between, he loved this character so much, he would, like, in between scenes, since he was already in makeup, he would like go out with the crowd and he would pretend to be the Wolfman, and the crowds loved him and he loved this part. This, like, there was horror roles that he hated, like, for example, he hated playing the Mummy. Like, he just was apparently was just miserable the whole time. But the Wolfman, he held in pretty high esteem, and I think that's why he's good in this, and he continues to be good all the way up to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
I mean, they've found, and Tony was mentioning this, they found a through line for Lawrence Talbot, which is that after the first movie, he is the man he's basically the wandering Jew. He's the man who is doomed to just wander and look for death and get into adventures. He doesn't get into many adventures because, there aren't that many movies and he's usually involved with just looking for death. But I mean, there's so much you could do with this Lawrence Talbot, but
Yeah, you could have a whole Incredible Hulk series.
absolutely. Yes, he could have been the Incredible Hulk. I'm not really complaining. I'm just saying that's what you're getting. You've got a guy who knows more than everybody around him. He's not a scientist, he's not a genius, but he knows how the world works and he knows that he can't die. And he's sort of always waiting for everybody around him to catch up to what he already knows.
He's
Which
the
is
the Highlander. It's more the Highlander than the
yeah.
than the Incredible Hulk, because that's what Highlander is like he's constantly just people just dying and he never dies.
Well,
Yeah.
he's also like a complex character. Every time we talk about the Wolfman, I think I say this: he's both the hero and the villain.
Yeah.
He's a tormented character. I think more than any of the other Universal monsters, that allowed Chaney to play a lot of different emotions. I mean, the only, Lugosi is amazing as Dracula, but Dracula is a pure villain in that in the Universal movies. Like he's mysterious, but he's not terribly complex in the way that Larry Talbot is. The only other horror character I think that really comes close to this level of complexity maybe Imhotep in the first Mummy movie. Perhaps Frankenstein's monster, but like.
So let me ask you a question, Drew. Why is it because of contractual obligations that they insist on casting these people as other things other than what they're good at? Like, I mean, you got Lugosi can do Dracula in his sleep, and everybody will love it every time. And Lon Chaney Jr. is brilliant at the Wolfman. And who's the Mummy?
Well, I mean, Boris
Karloff.
Karloff was the
Karloff,
mummy.
yeah. So why bother having these iconic people play other monsters? Like, why? Do they have a contractual obligation to these guys or something?
I mean, I'm sure some of that. There's a lot of speculation in horror fan circles about why they moved people around. Some of it, of course, I think was just to when Chaney in a vampire movie, he was the hot new star at that point. He had just come off of Man movie, so they wanted to bank on that.
But he could have been a non-monster character. You know what I'm saying? Like, why have them be a different monster than the monster they're brilliant at?
Well, I think part of that also could have been budgetary. Like Karloff, who originated both Frankenstein's monster and the Mummy. When they came around to doing these monster rally pictures, like he may have just wanted too much to put on that uncomfortable makeup over and over again. Like I said, there's a lot of speculation. Now, as far as Lugosi goes, he was actually offered Frankenstein's monster back when he had originally played Dracula.
Around when he did Dracula, yeah. He was offered,
and he turned it down because he didn't want to, allegedly didn't want to wear all that. Now, there's a lot of speculation if this was Lugosi trying to course correct his career, but I don't really blame Lugosi for how the monster comes across in this, because what we're seeing is not the performance that was shot or that he had signed on for. Like, he was a character, he was essentially going to be playing Igor in the monster's body, but they hacked down all the references to Ghost of Frankenstein. It's never explained that the monster is blind, so he's just walking around doing the cliche Frankenstein, what is now the cliche Frankenstein walk.
That is a very, very strange choice, man.
It makes sense if he's blind.
You said you were going to talk about this, Drew, so I want to ask, do you think that the reason they cut the dialogue is because he sounded so ridiculous with his accent?
Why was okay, so there's two stories about that. There is the one where they saw the dailies and people thought it was funny that it was Frankenstein with Igor's voice. I don't know if I quite believe that story, because it's the same voice we've heard with Igor. So we're used to that voice already. I don't know if I quite believe that. But there's another story where apparently the monster, because he has Igor's brain, was going to be this sort of quasi-fascist. Like kept talking about how, once he gets back to full strength, once he gets his eyesight back, he's going to take over the world.
Yeah.
And
It's
that
anti-Nazi thing.
yeah, well, but
Mhm.
apparently they thought that was doing a little bit too much to the war.
No, I'm saying it was an
And
anti-Nazi decision to not do it. Yeah.
well, they didn't. Yeah, they thought people wouldn't really want to hear Frankenstein talk like a dictator.
Right,
Like
right.
they and that's the story I tend to believe, because supposedly when Lugosi saw the finished film, he felt pretty insulted.
Mm.
And that's the reason why he didn't come back to play Dracula in the Monster Rally movie.
Really?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
so,
I don't know if that's true, because there's a lot of speculation about that, but I have a lot easier time believing that than the stuff about the voice, because again, it just would have been Igor's voice, and Igor's voice
Mhm.
is fine.
It was fine because people weren't really making fun of Lugosi yet. And
Yeah.
what I find believable about that story is that if people were watching a first assembly of the film, and the monster is now the monster who we have seen previously as a sort of extraordinarily dangerous giant, mentally delayed child that is killing people because it's just too powerful and doesn't know any better. Now it's talking about how it's going to gather a race of supermen together and take over the world. I could see people going, this just isn't the monster that I know, and just not being comfortable with it. I can
Mhm.
totally see that,
Yeah.
because the monster is the monster and you've gotten used to him by now. And but I'm trying real hard to keep my own suppositions away from being too like universal monster geeky, because the truth is people don't really people don't I'm pretty sure in the 40s people don't necessarily remember all that closely, but I'm pretty sure they remember the monster's pretty dumb, the monster's afraid of fire, the monster is the kind of monster that throws kids into the water because he doesn't know any better. And
That's
that's
sort of
really it.
what we end up with, but it's not the character that Lugosi. I would love this, none of this footage has survived, so we'll never know.
Is there a
if his,
screenplay? Is there a floating
Script.
film script
I'm
around?
sure if you hard enough, you could probably find a screenplay for this, but
Oh, that'd be cool,
like,
right? Then you see
yeah,
what the what the lines
I
were. Yeah.
thought that excerpts from that are why some of these stories have come about, if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong about that. But I think
I'm sure you're right about that.
I think that's why we have the knowledge that we have,
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
Yeah.
because of the original. Like, here's what it originally was going to be,
Mhm.
and we don't know what happened to the footage.
I wish we could have seen Lugosi's real performance, because I feel like he's sort of unfairly derided. What we see on the screen is certainly one of the weaker links in this movie.
Mhm.
Like he is unintentionally comical at times, and especially since they never established the fact that he's blind. But
Well, having had a comic book script mangled into
Yes.
teenagedom in a way that infuriates me, even though it got published, I can absolutely feel how that I
But
can
that wasn't
sympathize
by
with
you.
this.
That was by Tony. What was how do they spell your last name? Your last name was right.
Oh
It
yeah.
was Jason Henderson, and
Oh no, it was
Tony with an I.
yeah.
It was hilarious. They managed
here's
to
the
misspell
thing,
both of
though.
our names. Yes.
Here's the thing, though. Setting aside, I am a big Bela Lugosi fan, as everybody knows. But setting that aside, ultimately, we have the movie that we have, and it's pretty enjoyable. So I question: does other than it being sort of a black mark on Lugosi's legacy as an actor, which has obviously survived overall, because we're still talking about Bela Lugosi well into the 21st century. So does it matter? Like, does it ultimately matter? Because we still have this movie, and it's still, first of all, it's the first time we really have this like solidified Universal Monsters universe, and it's a pretty good monster movie. Like I said, it's a better werewolf movie than it is a Frankenstein movie, but like it really clips along. It's really entertaining, and I guess if I was more from Camp Frankenstein and less from Camp Wolfman, I might be disappointed in some of the Frankenstein stuff. But because it is more focused on the Wolfman, you end up with a movie that has a solid arc to it. Like,
Yes.
you have this exploration of darker themes. Like, if we had, more time, sure, they could have spent more time on the Frankenstein stuff, but like the characters don't feel one dimensional. Like Elsa Frankenstein, as Julia pointed out, is an interesting character. And I hate to sound like I'm too high on these movies, but I feel like something about these old monster movies, they did a really good job of establishing characters and
Yes.
motivations within short periods of time.
Well, I think
Yeah.
they also establish a sort of vocabulary, for want of a better word, of ideas that sticks around. Like, for instance, the way that the knowledge of Frankenstein, as a thing, as almost like an artifact that you can pick up and carry around and pass off from one person to another. That I feel like that's not an idea that existed much before the Frankenstein movies, and then does exist where Frankenstein the original had some ideas, and so now Talbot knows there's a Frankenstein out there. I'm going to go to her, and she will somehow be carrying around, like in a like it's a glowing orb, the knowledge of Frankenstein that she will
Right.
be able to unlock. And
Well, it becomes
yeah.
legendary, and in this case, it's legendary technology, but it becomes the same way you might have a legendary gem or a
Right.
tome.
Exactly.
and
It's
the
like
Well,
diary.
it's literally
and
a tome,
the
actually,
diary.
here.
The diary
Yeah.
is where the magic knowledge is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Her
Yes,
father's
that's
diary.
true. There's an aspect to it that's hey, you can find the writing, but what this becomes over all of these is eventually it's just kind of fuzzy. It's like, you're the son or you're the grandson or you're the daughter, and if I can get you in somewhere to a laboratory that is Frankenstein's and some books that are Frankenstein's, magic can happen essentially.
Right.
It's
Jason, I
amazing.
just want to say that knowledge of Frankenstein would be a great name for a Frankenstein movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
The knowledge of Frankenstein. Yes. Yeah. There was
More mysterious lost knowledge of Frankenstein.
yes. Knowledge is too soft a word for a title. I think it needs to be something else. Weltanschauung of
Okay,
Frankenstein.
get out of publisher mode and get back into podcast.
See, this is why we need our friends and significant others to call us out on these things.
Yeah. No, for sure.
People who don't have this turn
Tony,
out
if you
differently.
could see the hours-long conversations we've had about what titles should or shouldn't be good for different books, and inevitably, whatever I suggest, Jason does the opposite. I'm like, that's not no.
That's not true. I don't think that's
Mostly
true.
Castle of horror movie reviews and marriage counseling.
Yes.
Yeah.
This
The new-
show was originally called the Castle Dracula Horror Movie Podcast. And I'm so glad that we switched it. The funny thing is, I think we switched it like 8 years ago, and it's been yeah.
I did
We've
not-
been
I
Castle
was
of
not
horror
the
a
Twitter.
long time
A
now.
long
Like,
time. Yes.
There's your book, The Horror of It All: Marriage, Life, and Everything.
Oh, the horror of it all. Boy,
The horror of it all. A horror movie, marriage, life, and everything.
Yeah.
All encompassing book.
So
Memoir.
so
I want to tell you really quick that my my Immigration Lawyers Association, we have a local chapter, and this month I was like a featured member in our newsletter, and the headline the headline about me was about the fact that I do this podcast.
really?
Like, so apparently that's the most important thing that they
What
got.
did it say?
I
What does it
didn't set up
say?
the headline. I just did the
That's
blurb,
funny.
and that was like the last thing I mentioned in the blurb. But she said something like, I can't remember. I have to like look at it. But it was
Local
like,
podcaster also is a
yeah,
lawyer,
no,
I guess.
but it was something like she said something about horrifying podcast, like horror in parentheses or horrifying. but I can't remember exactly how she put it. But
This is a
I just
person
thought that was
who
really, I thought it was
who
really funny because I'm like, this is like the whole, because I guess because we're all immigration lawyers, so nothing about me in my immigration career is interesting, but that was the thing.
Well,
yeah,
also
reuniting families that have been separated by like authoritarian governments and saving lives.
Yeah, we all do
Nothing
that.
compared to being able to
but
discuss the
this is
zombies
your
of Moratau.
this is your tiny bit of celebrity, Julia. Just lap it up.
Very,
Like,
very tiny, extremely tiny.
I've learned from my years of doing comic books and now my years of doing this podcast that those fleeting moments of people treating you like you are the shit are like I'm like, for the long time I try to be like humble and just be like, oh, whatever, blah blah blah, like joke about it. Now I'm just like, fuck it, let's
Yeah.
like, so you
Well, that's
you rock
definitely how I
on,
am.
Julia.
That's definitely how I am with the kids, with my child's friends, because at this point, like when our kids talk about us to their friends, we end up sounding like just insanely cool, and I'm like,
Yeah.
we're just not that cool. But I've totally started owning it, where they'll be like, your parents are so cool. I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Like, if only they knew how very nerdy we actually are.
I think y'all probably are pretty cool parents. Like, I mean, I'm the outside looking in. I'm not one of your kids, obviously. But like,
We're
I
good on
think,
paper. Yeah, I mean it's all
We're
right.
good on
Yeah,
paper, exactly.
but
So-
we're digressing.
Yeah, we're far afield. We don't have the knowledge of Frankenstein, that's for sure.
Mm.
So
Or not even the diary.
So what Talbot is about here, he has latched on, it's a wonderful sort of goal. He's like, I've got to figure out how to die. See, he goes from one place to another. He goes to Maria Skunskaya, who is just one of the most wonderful just finds as an actor in Universal horror. She is this physically quite small, white-haired woman with this sort of wonderful European accent. I don't know what her accent is, and she's so great. She's so caring. You kind of instantly love her, and she has an instant love for Lawrence Talbot. She sort of takes responsibility for him, and she gives him his task, which is go.
No, well, because her son is the one who sired him, who made
Yes,
him into a wolf.
and do you know who
So she
played that
feels-
character?
Bela Lugosi.
Bela Lugosi played Bella, the one that bit her.
It all comes back to Bela.
I will
was
say
great.
I will say she has one of the most perplexing scenes though in this movie for me. In one of the transformation scenes, like they're on a wagon and the full moon rises and Larry starts to turn into a werewolf and he leaps off the wagon and takes off running into the woods and she starts shouting, "Don't leave, come back."
know. I
And
was like, why? He's gonna kill you.
Yeah.
No, well, it's because, but I saw that as since she was already had managed her son, because this relationship is just people sometimes they don't give enough weight, I think, to horror, but if you really look at the scenes and how everything plays out, when he comes to her, it's just so tragic. And he has to come to this camp and he's the outsider yet again. And he's like, hey, can you kill me? And of course, she's been through all of this with her son. She knows what he wants, what can happen. And she's forced to kind of relive some of that. That's super tragic. And I think when what she's saying, come back, is I think she truly feels like, well, if I could deal with that with my son, I could perhaps have stop him from murdering people. But she physically can't stop him. And
by the way, Jason, she's Russian.
Yeah. She's Russian.
And but all of the scenes, although I do kind of like their road trip montage.
It's good stuff.
I think it's great. Like, it's great that
I could never figure out how long had passed because there was always full moons.
Yeah.
Well, it had to have been a 28 days or whatever it is because there was yet another full moon at that point, and he seems to have he said he was looking.
the
He said
moon is
he said he
always
had looked
full.
everywhere for her, so I guess he'd been on his own for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Right. The months are lightning fast. It's dreamy. To be perfectly honest with you, it's impossible to tell how much time is passing as
Well,
they.
do you want him to turn into the Wolfman or not?
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
like, like that. This is what you paid to see. I don't see. That's when people, not just this werewolf movie, but any werewolf movie. Like, there's occasionally like you'll read a criticism like, it seemed like too much that it was too quick between full moons, and I'm like, I don't want to watch a werewolf movie where like he only turns into a werewolf once. Like,
Right,
Well,
right,
and
right,
plus
right.
what
people will
that's
complaining about that. People
Right.
will
Yeah.
absolutely go, well, you didn't change in the werewolf very much. It was like a lot of talk. Like,
Well, that's just the whole repeat to yourself. It's just a show. I should really just relax thing. Because honestly, that's every movie. There's something like 24, the TV series. People be like, there's no way all that happened in 24 hours. It's like, yeah,
yes.
just repeat to yourself. It's just a show.
That's absolutely right. By the way, the thing they did in 24 that I loved was that the producers just said, we pretend that everybody basically teleports. There is no travel time. That's the bottom line, is that it
No
takes no
travel time,
time.
no bathroom time, no eating time. Yep.
Yeah, everybody can just move like lightning from one place to another, and it's not a problem. But yes, so now, I mean, in a sense, just like Dorothy looking for the wizard. So Lon Chaney is moving from place to place, picking up people. So he picks up Maria Uskinskaya. They travel together to find to find Baroness Frankenstein, and then he scams her. Now
they're
Julia,
looking for Dr. Frankenstein. They
right?
don't know that he's dead.
That's true. Okay, so I can't remember how this works exactly. Does he goes to the wreckage first before he goes to see the Baroness? Isn't that right?
Yes. Well,
Is that where he meets the
No, he
monster?
goes to the he goes
to
to
the
like the
Wolfman.
yeah, but he goes to the restaurant, to the tavern, and they go, "Oh no, you're looking for him. Like, why would you do that? He's horrible. Get out. We don't want you here." So then they point, like, I guess they do point him toward the ruins, and then
Mm,
they tell him that he's dead. I guess at that point, I'm not sure.
They say that he died a long
Yeah,
time ago,
right.
and
yeah.
he turns into the Wolfman, and he crashes into the under part of the ruins, which are frozen.
Which are
And
frozen. In this universe, you can have this ice cavern underneath this rather mildly temperatured village, and it's wonderful. I mean, how
It
this is a
looked like it was
dream.
actually, that cavern looked like it actually had snow in it, because everything looked really slushy. So when he's
Yes.
lying down, face
Mm-hmm.
down in the water, I was like, he must be really freaking cold. And then he finds that the ice part where Frankenstein's monster is in this, like, behind this ice wall, and he breaks through. And then as soon as he breaks through, he wakes up. So I'm like, why? Is it just literally
Can we
two
talk about that
degrees?
for a second? So first of all, when Talbot sees the shadow behind the ice, and he breaks through the part that reveals the head of the monster at that point doesn't look to me like Bela Lugosi, the actor.
it's not his stunt man.
Really.
There's several scenes where it's pretty obvious that
That's so weird because it's a
there-
close up. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a close up.
I
And
thought that was. I think that one was Eddie Parker. Isn't that what we decided, or was it? Or was
it
it
might
Bill
have been.
Perkins?
There's two
Bill
there's two
Perkins and
stunt
Eddie
guys who are
Parker
doing all the
kind of
work here.
both play a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Well, also like when you later on have the battle scene, like there's points where like the monster is like manhandling Larry Talbot, and as you
Yeah.
pointed out, Jason, Lon Chaney Jr. was a very big man, and
Yeah.
Bela Lugosi wasn't quite up to bat.
Yeah.
So like, honestly, that like like that right there is probably, we want to talk about whether he was miscast or not, like that might be the one thing that I do kind of agree with some of the detractors on, in that not nearly imposing enough physically when you stack him up against Lon Chaney Jr., who just looks like he could throttle you.
Yes. He's a giant person, and in fact, to me, by the way, that's what is so effective often about Lon Chaney Jr. is he's a big person. You get the impression that he could hurt you physically, whether he wanted to or not. And so that's why he's sort of always playing people who don't even raise their voice particularly. He's always a gentle giant. He's wonderful. I mean, he's so great to watch. Is this before or after Of Mice and Men?
This is after Of Mice and Men.
Okay. Because that's, of course, I mean, to me, that's the role that everybody remembers him for if it's not Larry Talbot, which is, just Lenny.
It's definitely his second most famous,
Yeah.
like actual acting role. Like, a lot of people will talk about him in the Mummy movies that he did, but like, if we're being completely fair, like there wasn't other than lumbering around and menacing people. It's not quite as much acting as it is,
Sure.
in something like this or in Mice and Men.
Well, and that movie was I just looked it up. It was 1939. Burgess Meredith, by the way, an actor who never shows up in Universal Horror, and the world is poorer for it because God knows we could have used him, in any one of these things. He would have made a great Dr. Praetorius returning, somewhere around here. Okay. So yes, we raise the monster. The monster immediately is helpful because Lon Chaney's like, "Hey, monster, tell me where Dr. Frankenstein kept his secret files," and the monster knows exactly where it is. That's pretty great. Pretty good for the monster. And he misses like one of the hidden passages, but he's like, "Files are in there." He goes in it, can't find the secret diary though. It's behind yet another something or other. So now they have to go and get the help of the Baroness, and because he learns of her existence. In here, by the way, shows up Dwight Fry as one of the townfolk, and it's very strange. It's so strange to see Dwight
I
Fry.
love this character.
He's great. He's the one like town character really who has a lot of dialogue, but it's still a very minor role, and it's so weird that this is just what it is to have a contract. Is that he kind of barely shows up compared to like when he was in Frankenstein, he was in
Renfield.
Dracula. Yeah, he was Renfield. Yes, he was Fritz. But he's there. It's good to see him there.
Hey, he's an excellent angry villager.
Yes.
Yeah, but he's not just like this angry villager. His whole demeanor is like this kind of soft, like the way his voice is. He's very memorable, and just
Yes.
the way he delivers everything, and his approach is so odd but interesting.
I agree.
I just really like how he's decided to play this character and kind of wheedle his way into getting the town riled up and everything. It's fascinating character work.
What's interesting about this movie with the villagers actually is we never really get like the full on rampage with pitchforks and torches the way we do in some of these other movies. I mean, there's a little bit when they're chasing the Wolf Man, but like towards the end, it's really more like the Dwight Fry character and the bartender kind of getting each other riled up.
Yeah, but well, that's because also when the monster showed up, everybody's like, "Holy damn, the monster's back! Get the hell out!"
I like the mayor a lot in this.
Oh yeah,
Lionel Atwill, the mayor, is like sort of this reasonable authority figure. Like
he's hilarious.
He's different than like you think of like the way authority figures normally are in this movie. They would be right there with the rest of the mob, like, okay, let me. Where's my pitchfork? Where's my torch? Let's go chase some monsters down in the woods. And he's more like, hey, maybe we should use our brains this time,
right?
Like all this like burn down the castle and everything. It doesn't seem to be working.
Well,
so
yeah, because he's like, okay, well, we did that, and yet here we are faced with a monster again. So obviously that didn't work, townspeople. So we tried torches, pitchforks, and the whole 9 yards, and look. Here's the monster just running through our wine party, like our festival. Well, that obviously did not work in the past. So we're gonna have to get really creative and really hardcore to get rid of this monster. Lest he disrupt our wine festival yet again in the future.
Yeah, but people learning from the past is not as nearly as common as it should be.
So it is impressive.
That's
Yes.
that's true. But also, we've also kind of skipped over. There's a whole other aspect of this movie that's a mystery. So our intrepid doctor has been searching for his escaped patient, who's also probably a murderer.
Ah,
To
yes.
both, there's tragedy in the murders that happen in the escape that happens in the sanitarium. But also now he's tracking that down. He enlists a detective. He's like, there's no way. There's the whole thing of like, there's no way this can be that Larry Talbot.
Right.
And that's also cool. So even trying to piece together all of that, even going back to revisit, that's where they find the grave robbers. Like there's they packed it tight with stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why,
is
when people think
fascinating.
of, that the monster's in this, the monster doesn't get it's because everything is so packed that as you try to piece it together in your mind afterwards, you're like, where was the monster? Well, I mean, he's through it the whole thing. It's just
Right.
there's so much going on. And Talbot
Well,
is so
I
tragic. Yeah, go ahead.
I love the whole investigation part of this
Yeah.
movie, because like the thing is, it's funny to me about the cop that again, he disappears midway through the movie, but like
Right.
the idea that he's like, okay, well, there's no way that this is the actual Larry Talbot. There's no way that somebody came back from the dead. None of this makes sense. If we were not in a monster movie, this cop would be completely right.
Yeah.
Like he is not wrong in any of the stuff he is saying. Unfortunately, he
Yep.
is in a horror movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean,
Boy.
even the doctor's going, well, you're not really turning into a wolf. You really just think you're
Right.
turning into a wolf.
They introduced that word, by the way, lycanthropy,
Yeah.
as the belief that one turns into a wolf.
Well,
Talbot, meanwhile, is murdering people.
that is a mental illness.
Yeah, no, for sure. But
But
in the
it's
movie,
real in this universe.
Yes.
yeah, I mean, exactly. In fact, what many times people have taken to calling werewolves lycanthropes, even though a lycanthrope is a person who merely believes they turn into a wolf.
Well, the word lycanthrope does mean werewolf.
There you
like,
go.
roughly.
Yeah, it's a wolf
So
man.
like it's not wrong. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
wrong to use that either way.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I want to talk for a moment though to switch gears towards Ilona Massey, who's playing Baroness Frankenstein. I mentioned earlier that her 1940s wardrobe is to die for. I mean, it's really
No,
cool.
it's fantastic. I just love her clothing.
She is so fabulous, and like I say, she's often dressed, in that Katharine Hepburn fashion, just very modern clothes. So this
Well,
is
she has a Katharine Hepburn vibe. You know what I mean? Like just the way she kind of carries herself and delivers her lines. She's just so special. Like I really feel like I
But
want to
much
see
much
more stuff with her.
blonder.
well, what an interesting person this woman was. All right, so she's Hungarian, and she's born in Budapest. She made a bunch of films, but my favorite detail about her is that in 1954 she was the host of a television show called Dumont's Ilona Massey Show, which was literally a musical variety show. and the idea of this very regal woman being a sort of female Lawrence Welk hosting in the mid 1950s, hosting musical guests and I guess sketches and stuff. I mean,
Well, and I'm looking at her IMDb, and before that, she's in an episode of the Colgate Comedy Hour. So, I mean, clearly she did a lot of different things. But I'm dying to see a movie that she's in called The International Lady. International Lady. I'm like, what is that? I don't know. I got to see more stuff with her. She's really
yeah,
interesting.
it'd be real. Maybe Julie and I will do a deep dive into the oeuvre of Ilona Massey. I think that'd be super fun.
She's incredibly accommodating though too, because he goes, "Hey, so I'm not really gonna buy the castle.
Yeah, I totally lied to you.
I lied to you, and oops.
And she
And
just
she's
smiles. It's like, really?
Well, and the mayor is like, "Hey, as long as y'all are around, why don't you just join us at our big party?" That's weird. I mean, that's just super weird. And she's like, "Whatever, I'm so rich, I don't care if anybody buys my land, and it's fine." And Julia was watching it, and she was like, "What, that asshole?" You know, that he was like,
yeah, I mean, you kind of, I mean, Larry Talbot is such, he's dealing with so much that you kind of go, maybe this is his last ditch. But as a person,
"Yes,
especially like nowadays, I have a very I don't have a kind outlook on what I term time vampires.
yeah,
Yeah.
Like, time is something you can never get back. You can make more
Especially somebody
money. You can,
who lies to you.
yeah.
Who
But
lies to you
so
to try to get you.
so
He's
flaky
trying
time
to
vampire people, she's a lot nicer than most people should be to this person who called her out into
Right.
the sticks
yeah."
to supposedly give her a lot of money for a thing that she wants nothing to do with, that she would rather forget, and then goes, "Oh yeah, I guess we can still go to dinner."
Right.
Yeah.
It
okay,
is.
but in defense of Talbot,
Mhm.
like I get where you're coming from. From her perspective, she's certainly more patient than most people would be. But from Larry's Talbot's perspective, he's trying to keep further
Oh,
people from becoming werewolf food.
Sure.
oh no,
Yeah,
no,
no, no, no.
I'm in
Yeah, we're not
agreement that
saying he shouldn't have done what he did. Just that
he
her reaction is not what most people would.
he has to do. Had this been a longer movie, there might have been more of him going, "Look, I really did make a mistake. Like, this is not the way. You have to understand where I'm coming from, my tragedy and my pain, because
Yeah.
this is he's thought it through. He's going. This is his last ditch. I don't know what else to do, and that also plays into how tragic everything is. He doesn't want to manipulate her, really, but he's like, "Look, I don't know what else to do, but this plan I've concocted."
But that's
But it
And
also
is fascinating that she's like, "Oh, okay,
he doesn't really lie to her that long.
no,
sure,
no. The moment she
Yeah,
sits
but he
down,
dragged her out there
true.
yeah,
under false
Uh,
pretenses.
I just want to point out that the way all of this gets treated has a lot to do with the class of these two characters, though. That in the
right, right,
end,
right, right,
he's like, "I don't want to buy her thing," and it doesn't matter to her. Why? She's super duper wealthy. Him too. I mean, he's a fugitive on the run, but he's still a Talbot. He still owns all these estates. You know, in theory, if he could get his identity back, so he actually, he's probably a little bit part of the world where he's like, "I don't care. What difference does it make if somebody sells a little bit of land?" So neither of them look at it the way you or I would look at it, where we're like, where such a missed opportunity can be very painful.
Maybe,
Um,
but for him, Jason, I don't think he has access to any of that money because he's dead.
True. No, no, no. I'm just saying, but he could, and he's part of that world. He knows how
Yeah.
she's going to look at it. And so yes, yeah, I think class is a part of this as much as anything else. And that's also why the mayor is like, well, you two would be great to share my table at the party because they are visiting people of a certain class. It's just like in the Hammer films where, a governess who isn't noble by any means, but nevertheless can move through any world, will instantly be invited to stay out at the castle, whereas Michael Ripper and his pals never get invited, and that's just the way these films work.
So it's funny, until the doctor shows back up, it also almost seems like they're
Yeah,
trying to
like
set
there
up
might be a romance here,
yeah.
but then no, because first of all, because he is so intensely wrapped up in his own problems and killing people, by the way, that he's not probably an ideal suitor for her.
He's
But the
not an
doctor is.
ideal suitor for anybody, but
Right. He's not.
he doesn't know that.
Right.
yeah, 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 right, exactly.
So yeah, the doctor winds up, and clearly they project. They don't have much time, but they project that there's a thing going on between her and the doctor because she's putting her hands on him all the time, like all the time. She's always like holding his arms and holding his shoulders, and so we get that they are together as they do, as we sort of bound into the end of the film, which is, hey, we're going to do an experiment. We're going to try and can somebody please explain the experiment to me? This is where I know they're going to try to do an experiment having to do with moving the energy from one to the other. Like maybe, if I understand correctly, they're going to move, because science in Universal is both science and also magic. They're going to move Talbot's energy into the monster, so the monster, and then the monster can die, and that will allow Talbot to die. Yes.
No.
No. All right.
No.
What is the
what they're originally trying to do is just siphon off the energy from both of them. They're not
see.
trying to put it
Right.
into the
Okay.
monster.
I
What
apologize.
you
All right.
described is actually what he ends up doing,
Right.
which is why the monster gets like, you know, sort of juiced at the end of the movie.
I see.
Because, you know, he temporarily turns into a mad scientist and says, well, I have to see the monster at full power.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, the fact that Elsa's still with him after that is where, because she's like, what? You can't do, like, you know, I trusted you.
Well,
She's
you
a
can't
very
get into
trusting
this lab
person. She
without
was a very
going nuts.
trusting soul.
Yeah.
Because he eventually kind of does fess up, like, you know, this is too good to be true. I know I'm not, you know, doctored in the same way as Frankenstein was, but it's this whole monster thing's just too good to pass up. So I'm gonna, like, you know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I got it. There's no way I can not bring back this monster. But
Yeah.
when he's doing it, he's looking at it like how you jump start a battery, you know, a car, where you got to hook it up in a certain, you know, if you don't want to blow up the battery, you follow procedure and do it the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
But
whole
he
thing
looks
bugged
at
me.
it and goes, you know, well, I know how to do it the way we want to, but now that I read this, if I double up the polarity on negative, then it does, you know, what I want it to do. And, you know,
I was not a fan of any of this whole part of the movie. That's part of the reason why I'm not a huge fan of the movie, because I was
And
like,
once
this is
again,
all kind of meh.
yeah, and what we also see once again in a movie, you know, how things can go wrong when you have a perfectly good plan and then one asshole in the team decides, wait a minute, I'm going to start switching things up on
And
the
for no
fly.
good reason. I mean, we never really he didn't, I don't know, it just
well,
seems
it's,
to come out of
it's
nowhere.
all
narcissism and
scientists and
hubris. Yeah.
all scientists are a little bit crazy in this universe.
Yes.
At least that's
And maybe in real life.
really it.
You know, in a
I hope not in real life.
again,
but,
if we had
like,
expanded it a bit more, it's possible that he's like, I can't pass this up because, you know, because his primary like doctor, like he seems to be primarily a psychologist, right?
yeah,
And so, which is different than, you know, lab scientist.
Yeah.
But it, you know, had there been, and again, I don't want to put too much into, you know, oh, if only this, if only that, but it seems like if they'd put a little bit more into, I have to study this monster because a human brain in a different body, like, what, you know, there's too much here that I don't understand, that I would love to study more. So
Yeah.
by ending that, I can't study that. I can't pass up this opportunity. Instead, he just becomes yet another mad scientist, which is weird. And
However,
everybody
briefly.
goes, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But that, it does come abruptly. It seems like the transition for that isn't, you know, his motivations aren't super clear. I mean, it's really to move the movie along and to get some monster fighting done,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
because we have to get to the monster wrestling. So
Right.
like,
Which is great. I mean, monster
it's-
wrestling,
it's
by the
Really
way.
good. That's what I
but-
was talking about when I said the
yeah.
effects are great and the stunts are great. They really look like they're just beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
I you know, I think that if there was anything that like my inner 10-year-old would want to be longer, I wish that there was more of the fight, because like,
I think
first of-
everybody wants this movie, wants that, like, sees this movie,
Yeah.
wants that.
I mean, we don't really get a definitive winner.
Yeah.
You know, we although I think if I were a ref, I would give it to the Wolf Man because he gets the last blow in. But like,
Well, I mean, it's kind of it's what do you call it? It's forfeited because they drown. So I don't think there
that
is a
doesn't
winner.
really
It's
keep him down for long, though.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, I which is the one? See, I watched these with our older child when she was little, and I remember we were really struck by some of the, you know, like Sophia was really in love with the gypsy girl that hangs out with Lawrence Talbot a lot in, I think it's House of Dracula. I think maybe it's House of Frankenstein. So now I got to watch the next couple to see where some of these characters show up again, because we
You know,
loved all that stuff.
I think as far as actual, it's strange but I think in actual, terms of an actual monster throwdown, I think ironically the best one that they did once, as far as like staging these, was Dracula versus the Wolfman in Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein, like where they're fighting through different rooms and they're throwing furniture at each other, and
Oh gosh,
like,
yeah.
yeah, it's good. It's like they learned from doing the other movies, and it was like, well, this might be the last one of these we do, so go big or go home.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny to think also that that's going to be pretty quick, because this is 1943, and that's like what, like 1948 or something?
I 48 sounds right to
Yeah.
me.
So I mean, that's just a couple of years. I mean, that's just a couple of years that we're going to get from here to there. And it's sort of amazing to me how quickly the universal cycle sort of happens. Um, I know that we talked about Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein. I think we did that several years ago,
Yeah.
but I definitely need to go back and watch it again.
I would love to circle back to do Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde at one point, because I think that one's fun as well. But like, as far as this movie goes, like, it definitely follows the pattern of, the monsters are dead, the movie's over. Like, none of these movies, we talked about this when we just did Son of Dracula, like, none of these movies really spend a whole lot of time on, wrapping things up. Like, there's no epilogue.
There's no denouement.
No, there's not. It's just over. And, I think that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, as their status is like escapist entertainment for a country at war, because I think, they knew people had a lot on their minds, and they just wanted to entertain and, get on to the next thing. And there's something to be said for that, because these movies, they hold up pretty well considering how old they are. Like,
absolutely.
I think the fact that we're still talking about Universal, the Universal monsters, says a lot. And I don't know. I'm almost veering into final thoughts there. But...
Well, and I think we should actually get to our final thoughts. But I believe to pick up this mini topic of why are the Universal horrors still so relevant, and I think the answer is they're relevant on their own as works, but they're also relevant in dialogue with other work. So they set this vocabulary of what horror could be. And it just sort of drilled deep into the psyche of certainly American filmgoers, so that this is what a graveyard looks like, and this is what a grave digger looks like, and this is what a vampire looks like, so that everything afterwards is in dialogue with them. That's pretty powerful, I mean, I it's inescapable.
I mean, it sets the tone for horror, like what we in the West think of horror. And then if you go by, the Bloodthirsty trilogy, even in Japan or elsewhere, there becomes a mythology of horror that's set forth by Universal and Hammer. That's the through line to what a vampire is in that, and into vampiric stuff in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, all through, like, this Western idea of universal horror is the seed for so much. And there's deviations, and people do new things, and some people go, universal horror didn't work for me, I'm going to try something different. But like you're saying, like, what a grave digger is, what a creepy graveyard is, I think those creepy graveyards, while there are some, they even inform things like the graveyard in Return of the Living Dead. Would it look like that if we didn't have a universal graveyard at some point?
Very good point.
Maybe not. But those seeds, like that kernel, became something so much more iconic and powerful than I think anybody who was originally making these films could have imagined. And that's pretty amazing. It's and those are the things that get me kind of, where people don't give it enough credit. It's why I kind of get rankled a little bit about the current kind of HBO Max, Warner Brothers, the whole thing of, like, monetarily, maybe somebody thinks that reality TV, as long as it's making money, is just as powerful a product as Superman, Batman, or any DC stuff, right?
Yeah.
because there's so much other DC stuff than just that. But the idea that you would see a PowerPoint presentation where home
Yes.
builder whatever is on the same level as the ostensibly the mythology of our pop culture mythology,
Yeah.
our heroes, our these have become our Ulysses, our Beowulfs, right? In
Yeah.
so many ways as we move through time. Of course, there's still a Ulysses, there's still a Beowulf, right? But you know what I mean.
I absolutely.
And it galls me sometimes that there are I get that you need business people and stuff like that, but being an artist, being a storyteller, being a person who cares about these things and seeing them, the weight of what actually has guided so much pop culture in a certain way, or has affected so many people's lives, being equated with a very short-term thing, it gets on me. It weighs on me. And maybe I should be lighter. Maybe I'm taking it too seriously. But again, I think as storytellers, as someone who's passionate about these things, I don't know, it's kind of galling. But
I don't think you're wrong, but I think these will last longer than the conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
I
we know that this stuff ends up informing longer because we just did Werewolf Night, which was informed very much by stuff like this.
Well, to be fair, you know, when you talk about Monster Mashes and being happy, my first introduction to Monster Mashes, because they didn't show them on the Monster Theater where I watched other Universal stuff, was like Curse of the Werewolf, the record that also was a comic book. And then there's the Dracula Wolf Man Frankenstein Power record. And those, like, Wolfman, Jack Russell fighting Dracula in the Power Records thing was my, like, mind-blowing experience. And then, there was Mummy and Frankenstein and all these Power Records things, which were cool at the time because they often would have a comic book that you'd read along with.
Oh, yes.
And all of that, those were my first Monster Mashes. So later, when, I did see Abbott and Costello, when I did see Frankenstein Meets Wolfman, which was much later for me just because of that. I mean, you didn't have any way to, like, they came on TV or they didn't.
Yeah.
Right? Like, when we were growing up, there was no, hey, I'm going to click on, name a channel or go to
you
YouTube.
would absolutely rely on, therefore you would rely on picture books a lot and magazines.
Exactly.
And so forth. But we definitely got to get our final thoughts. But I really have a feeling that we should return maybe for the House movies at the very least. House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula. It would maybe be, I don't know. We don't have to decide that here and now, but I think I'd really like to do those. So what order did we go? Julia, final thoughts. This has been so fun. I'm so thankful that you're here to discuss this with us. Your final thoughts, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
Well, so yeah, as we've been talking about it, I've remembered some of the things I did like, the atmospheric stuff, the performances, like I say, the costuming and all that. But I also remembered some of the stuff that annoyed me and the plot things that were just kind of didn't make sense. So I think this is just kind of one of those in the middle movies for me that I enjoyed watching, and certainly it's not. I have not. Have not felt like any of this has been a waste of time, but it's not going to be in my top 15 movies that we've done in the podcast. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say about that. No, I think that's pretty much it. Yep, thanks.
Very cool. Drew, what about you?
Again, this has been on my wish list of movies for us to do for God knows how long. So
I hope we treated it with the dignity that
I think this was a great discussion. I loved talking about this. I think it was we did a due amount of dissection and analysis, and I enjoyed talking about everybody and everything. Going back to kind of what Tony says, like the Universal monsters will live forever because these are timeless, and they're every October they're everywhere. So I think that this part of our pop mythology is always going to be vital, and it's always going to be something that it continues to inspire new generations. And that's all I got.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Tony, what about you?
I really like this movie. I think we covered. It's weird since I talked about this on Borgo Pass as well. It's a little bit. It feels a little bit. It's just strange. Like it feels like I've cheated on this crew, by pre-gaming it with another podcast.
No,
But
I'm so glad
we
because you can think of things that we certainly hadn't
Yeah, I
thought
was
of.
going to ask you if there was anything that you guys talked about on that we
Oh
totally.
yeah, I mean it's a total. That's kind of why it's great. Like you have different groups of friends that you hang out with, and you talk about different things. And I was still excited to do this movie because this is our crew. So yeah, we got to mention a lot of different things, and everybody kind of brought. There's just a different vibe, and I enjoyed that. It's awesome hanging out with Jen because we've been friends for wow since the early '90s. So. It's so cool. That was super cool because A, his podcast is great, and B, we've been friends for so long and reconnected over the past 3 or 4 years, which is great. But we've been doing this for even longer as far as a crew. So it was awesome. I really enjoy the Monster Rally movies. I again think it's just so interesting that to start with the kernel of a world weary werewolf who knows that the longer he lives, the more people will die, and he wants to end his suffering and the potential suffering of others. That's heavy. Like for Universal to tackle that, and it doesn't get as heavy in the movie, and I think that's good. But when you expand on it and really think about what is going on, this discovery of another monster. I am a monster. I live in a world where there are other monsters. Is fascinating as well. And how, again, I do wish, I agree with Drew that I wish we had more of the alternate stuff to compare and contrast. I think it ends a little abruptly. I think there's pacing stuff that's not super great about it, but it's kind of, that's what you did at the time. 72 minutes, not bad. Would have been fine at 80 or 90. But yeah, I dig it. I'm with Drew, like warts and all. It's really cool. Really cool to revisit. And who doesn't? I mean, if you're a Universal fan, who doesn't want to see monster fights? It's like the equivalent of like a lot of other things, like taking the two action figures, like here's a Micronauts figure and a He-Man. I'm gonna like in your kid. Like it's
Yes.
like that. Like who doesn't want that?
Perfect. I really am happy that we watched this. I feel like I've been so busy lately that this show has been really important to me, sort of staying sane, and in the sense of in the Scrooge sense, and keeping Halloween, right? And this film in particular is so important, and so really feels like we're keeping Halloween to go back to the universal well, and watch Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. So thank you very, very much for this. I feel like spending a little more time in this Universal universe. So maybe we will soon. Let's get our endorsements. Whatever you've been, whatever you want. Listening to, watching, selling, log rolling is totally okay on this show. And so I want to hear about it. Starting with Julia, do you have anything to tell us about?
The only thing I want to endorse is that everybody vote, because democracy is on the line this election. And you may not think your vote matters, but it really, really does. Like there's been so many, especially like the local, elections that have been decided by like 1 or 2 votes in many cases. So it's important to get out there and vote, find out what's going on your ballot, and make your voice heard.
Wonderful. Thank you. Drew, go ahead.
I'm going to endorse England's Screaming, which was a gift from my editor, Russell Hillman. He sent it to me a year ago, and unfortunately, I didn't get around to reading it until this month. It's by a guy named Sean Hogan, and it is a series of short stories that connect together to create a whole novel. But they're all it's like kind of like what Alan Moore did with Victorian literature in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but this guy is doing it with 20th British
Huh.
horror films.
Wow.
So like you have a through line about Damien from The Omen, but then he's like running up against Christopher Lee as Dracula or the Cenobites from Hellraiser, and it's crazy creative stuff. It's good Halloween time reading, and just writing on its own. I don't know how easy it is to get a hold of in the States. Again, this was sent to me from somebody in England, so if people want to look this up and they find that it's hard to find in America, I apologize.
Say the title again.
England's Screaming.
England's Screaming. Okay.
Good stuff. I also want to say one more time, for the last time this month, go to Global Comics with an X. Look up Halloween Man. All of it is for free. There are new Halloween Man comics for the first time in over a year. Make a profile. Start following me, please. Like, I love this platform. This month has been amazingly successful, but I want to reach everyone. And so if like you have, for whatever reason, have been listening to me yammer on about horror films for the last decade, but have never thought about checking out my comic because of financial reasons or whatever, now you have that barrier for just a little while longer, all for free. Please check it out.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Tony, what about you?
By the way, Drew, I just sent some more people your way today. Coworker who I think and a good friend for a long time, and I was like, you would hit it off like nobody's business. And he's the person who's got the most haunted everything in his neighborhood.
Nice.
My friend, another Jason, by the way. And he and his wife are always like, he's like, I got to do this work, but I'd rather be doing my haunt stuff. So I at some point I got to get, like, you guys should hang out, because I think you would, all of you, you and Jamie and Jason Allison would all just really hit it off in a major way, I think. But yeah, I've been driving people there as much as possible, so I'm really glad to hear. I've been super busy trying to put together. We go into the studio, I think I've said before, for Deserts of Mars. We're going back into the studio with my friend Jeff, who's in the band Duel, which are awesome. And he produced Rain and I's Rise from Fire, produced and engineered, that, and the last Deserts of Mars EP at his studio Red Nova Ranch. Right now he's working with this amazing metal band, Spirit Adrift, who are, they've been in magazines, touring Europe, everything, which is a hard act to follow. Like, I don't know. But I've been so busy trying to put together this new album, which, by the way, if you want to help out with that, you can check us out at Bandcamp, Deserts of Mars. I know you use the music for the beginning of the show. I haven't had as much time to, it seems like there was, I've been watching some, Blu-rays and stuff, but Ray and I have been actually enjoying Avenue 5 again, which is hilarious. But I just noticed last night something I'm gonna pre-game. Maybe this is dangerous, but I was on Tubi looking for stuff and noticed that there is a chunk of Santo movies. And boy, am I looking forward to I don't know when I'm gonna have time to watch just however many Santo movies there are, which look like a huge chunk. I hope there is. I hope there's dozens. But it looked like enough to really get me, because I think there was a Frankenstein Santo movie.
My dad was really into those.
I will watch an infinite amount of that. Just give me all of that. It's just, I don't know. And also, like, when you got Santo and vampire women and all of that, like Frankenstein just fighting monsters.
There's one called The Treasure of Dracula that is just fabulous. It's a really good one. Yeah.
I just noticed that as I was searching for things, going, what? Wait, what? And what an embarrassment of riches. Not everything's perfect. And there's a lot that's maybe not going great, but inner monster kid person who will, again, go to a Fantastic Fest and watch dozens of movies in a week, like that part of me is like, I cannot wait. I don't know when I'm gonna have time, because like I said, I don't have a lot of time to to tighten up everything to put on this album. But I'm super stoked. It seems like there was something else. I think last time I mentioned EK Boys, which we did a great interview, and I still think it's worth you checking it out because really good people made that movie. But yeah, I can't think offhand. I'm sure I'll miss something. If I do, I'll post it. But I did see that there's a new edition of Dunwich Horror coming out too, like in January, Blu-ray with a new scan. So I'm stoked about that. So that's me.
Wonderful. Fantastic. And I can't endorse just one thing, so I'm going to just let those endorsements stand, and I'm definitely going to watch some horror movies as we enter into the weekend of Halloween. Thank you.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Yeah, thank you
Oh,
so much
yeah.
for being with us. And
Yeah,
I've no
happy
doubt
Halloween.
see you next week. Happy Halloween. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.